There are two things I think that sort of merit an answer there. One, we are redoing our driver's license systems for all Mississippians. And it's not just the redoing of that system. I think it's going to open up some interesting potential by way of identity management or other opportunities. You know, the cards are going to be a lot smarter, and I think that's an innovative thing. The other, and we're starting this, our Secretary of State is going to do a business portal, which I understand not a whole lot of states have. It kind of brings together several pieces, parts in terms of folks building a business, putting a business together in Mississippi and registering. So we ought to be doing that this summer, which I think is going to be a great project. Probably signing our Office 365 agreement at an enterprise level. Still a challenge, I think, to implement. But we have been sort of working on that for a couple of years, building support with the agencies. And so I was very pleased to get that done. Maybe next year I'll have a better report on how we're doing. Yeah, so we're going to really stay focused on IT workforce issues. So NASCIO has a new report out. It's a big issue for us to stay focused on. A lot of states are struggling with that issue, and it's something that'll get talked about a good bit here. We're also looking at forming a CIO council to sort of better the strategic dialogue in our state in terms of planning and budgeting and developing shared or enterprise services at the highest level. And then I would think, you know, focused on cloud storage, cloud DR is something that we're sort of peeling the onion back in terms of where we play in that space. I'd say workforce is probably the most significant, to be candid. We have gotten to the place, similar to many other states, where the pay scale, certain job structures are just dated. And it just increases the demand on recruitment. You know, recruiting is that much more difficult to get done. And so we're going to pay a whole lot of attention to that. I've already learned and taken a few notes from other CIOs on internship programs and ways they're doing some recruiting, telecommuting policies by way of it being a perk, and looking at some of those things. Yeah, so those are a lot of that's in the news now, right? So I'm reading all kind of new reports on, you know, I wore my Apple Watch for the weekend. Yet another platform, right, with which we would develop services. You know, with things like body cameras and such, the technology itself isn't as much of an issue from a policy perspective as is what do you do with all the data? You know, where do CIOs come into play? Is it public record kind of data? So attending this conference is important. We keep a close relationship with Gartner as well in terms of research and what's out there, trying to keep our finger on where that's going. Well, it's an ever vigilant kind of requirement. One of my biggest concerns on the policy side of cyber is that you misposition it so that, you know, you end up asking for or thinking that you need to get funding and then you have fixed it. You haven't fixed it. It's an evolving threat. And I think that's one of the bigger policy challenges that we have. One of the things we're doing is we're mapping our state security policy, which has been in place for a good number of years, with the NIST framework, the framework pieces. And we're trying to structure it in such a way that we'll be in line with the federal government, because typically that's one of the challenges that happens, right? You want to be in line so as dollars or programs flow, the state is positioned very, very well. Yes, we've done all these things. Yes, we're in alignment, and that's something we're paying attention to as well. Yeah, advocacy is one, right? Getting better at advocating. So we went out to San Jose a few weeks ago when NGA sponsored a cyber summit out on the West Coast. And I was there and got a call from our legislature about doing a cyber briefing when I got back. So We want to do more advocacy, but we want to do it very thoughtfully. We want to go in with sort of real goals and real ways that we can tell elected officials how we can get that threat landscape minimized as much as we possibly can. We want to build a good cyber community, right? So governance gets talked about a lot. Now, there are restrictions aren't the right word, right? There's just your state is how your state is, whether you're federated, centralized, the whole enchilada. But we want to continue to build community, right? Which is sort of the premise of the rising tide raises all boats. So if everyone is doing a good job and plugged in, by default, we think the state's going to be more secure. In NASCIO, not only individual states, but we've advocated for a number of things over the years. I mean, one I think is just a classic sort of alignment. So I mentioned the NIST framework and cyber. So, a tremendous amount of money comes to the states via federal programs. And typically what the CIOs want is to be both in alignment with federal priorities, but also given some flexibility. And I think that'll be one of the messages we have had and continue to have. We want to have ways or parameters with which those dollars can flow into the state and we can make the most effective use of them as opposed to building silos that sit, 80% unused. How can we better do that? Because it benefits CIOs in states when that can happen.